Today, I'm actually going to talk to you a little bit about my journey, why I don't practice law anymore. It's a question that I get asked a lot. Hey there, my name is Sydney Montgomery, and I'm the founder of Montgomery Admissions Consulting, where I provide personalized college counseling and law school admissions consulting. As many of you know, I'm the first lawyer in my family. I went to Princeton and Harvard Law School, but I left practicing law and I pivoted to consulting full time. I am passionate about helping students break down their generational barriers so they can step confidently into their higher education future. And I'm passionate about building communities, especially for first generation and minority students. Today, I'm actually going to talk to you a little bit about my journey, why I don't practice law anymore. It's a question that I get asked a lot. Why don't you practice law anymore? Do you practice law? Were you an attorney? Yes, I graduated from Harvard Law School, and after graduation, I clerked for a state level trial court. I clerked for Judge Ryan at the Montgomery County Circuit Court. I absolutely loved my time there. We were split on a family rotation and a civil rotation, and then after clerking, I joined a small family litigation practice in Bethesda, Maryland, where I was an associate and I practiced divorce and custody and mediation. I always wanted to be a family law attorney, so I think that's probably where a lot of people, especially in my life, are interested that I'm no longer practicing law anymore. I was one of those students who knew that she wanted to be a lawyer. When I was 8, I remember I asked my parents if they would adopt. They had the Wednesday's Child program on TV, and that program, which I don't think really runs anymore, basically showed the kids that were free for adoption. And what that term means, free for adoption in the foster care system, basically means that those students, those children, they had their parental rights terminated. So their parents weren't involved legally in their lives anymore, and so those children could be adopted or fostered for adoption without the worry of a biological mom or a biological dad or anyone else with parental rights wanting to take the child away from the foster care family. Oftentimes, when you have children in the foster care system, the plan is for reunification. And I think that's something that gets lost in the media. The goal is not for the system to take the child and send them off to a different family. The goal is always to provide the family services so that the child can be reunified, if possible, if safe to do so, if that's an appropriate place for the child to go. And so oftentimes when children are placed in the foster care system, they might be placed in kinship care with a relative, or they're placed with the foster family. It's with the understanding it's a temporary situation until the family is able to reunify. Now, sometimes that's not possible, and so when the parents aren't able to create a safe environment, or the department doesn't feel like they are, because those are not always the same thing, there will be a hearing to terminate the parent's rights unless the parent gives up their rights freely. And once the parental rights are terminated, then that child can, when they're placed in foster care or kinship care, they can be adopted a little easier. So that's a long tangent to say that there were all these programs encouraging people to foster and to adopt. Adopt Us Kids is a really great foundation and nonprofit that is near to my heart. So at the age of 8, of course, I didn't understand all of the backstory behind adoption and the foster care system and the systemic racism that is actually really prevalent in the foster care system. I just knew that I wanted an older brother or sister. And I knew enough about biology to know that that was not going to happen naturally, right? I didn't want to be the oldest. I was an only child at that time. Now I have a sister. She's 16, and there's an 11-year age gap between us. But she wasn't there at the time. So I wanted an older sibling to go through things for me. And I asked my parents if they could adopt because we had a guest room in our house, and that seemed really easy to me. They needed a home. We had a home in my head. It was free, although I didn't take into considerations all that goes into raising another child. But, my parents, they said no. I think they said it was too difficult or too complicated. I don't even remember what they said. But it actually ignited a fire in me where I started really thinking about all these children, right? That were just like me, who didn't get to grow up in a stable family. And I became very passionate about the foster care system. I remember when in middle school, I think I looked up that if only a quarter of the households in America took one child, there would be no more children in the foster care system. Of course, it's not so simple, but I really became passionate about advocating for these children. This became further ingrained in me when I saw some disparities in my own county. I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland. It's a incredible county with a lot of resources, good schools, good teachers, but there are still a lot of kids who fall through the cracks, who don't get the support they need, and it really made me feel like there needed to be more of a support gap, more of a family gap, a resource gap. And so my goal was to become a child advocate, to help advocate for the futures of those students or other students who are just caught in the crosshairs of custody issues, who aren't being able to live up to their full potential. So I had lofty goals. I had big goals. I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I went to law school. I wrote my personal statement on it. I actually had a lot of experience in college because my national philanthropy, I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Theta, and our national philanthropy is the court-appointed special advocates. So that work really tied in. I did a lot of volunteer work with community action at Princeton, working with group foster homes in Trenton, helping do cleanup. So I spent a lot of time dedicated to this issue. I was certain this is what I wanted to do. And that stayed with me. Although I will say that I don't think I fully understood what the role of the lawyer was in that situation and how I could affect change within or without the system. And as much as I loved and I'm passionate about that work, being an attorney in that situation is a little bit different based on the law. And so I did my first summer at Legal Aid. I got to work as a child in need of assistance attorney shadow. I wasn't an attorney, but I shadowed. And I also got to see private family law, domestic litigation. And I was still very passionate about that. But at the same time, going through high school and going through college, I learned a lot about the education system in this country in terms of admissions. So both of my parents were in the military. They were in the Navy, and my mom went to the military before she went to community college and eventually got her 4-year degree. And my dad got his degree online through the military. And so even though education was really important to my parents and to my family, and my mom's Jamaican, so, all those West Indies families, they know, right? They understand. They weren't really as knowledgeable, I think, as they would have liked to be about navigating the application process from high school. And so I had a lot of teachers that really covered me and really gave me step-by-step instructions, and that was really beneficial to me. And I ended up being one of the first students from my high school to go to an Ivy League, but that also taught me a lot about admissibility and affordability. I learned a lot about who gets in, what you need to get in. I mean, I was told, oh, you'll never be able to afford Princeton. Oh, they don't take kids like us from here. Oh, you need straight A's. And none of that was true, right? And so I started helping students through the college process. I started helping students and families understand about financial aid. And I started giving back to talks in my church, in my dance studios, in my community, in my school, as soon as I got to college, really. So I have been passionate about helping students navigate this process since 2012. And that was something that was also near and dear to my heart. It wasn't the plan. I'm a very type A planner. So of course I was in college and I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a child advocate. At the same time, I work to help get fantastic students into fantastic schools and help them tell their authentic stories. And this was a side business that I had, that I was one of those students that had to work multiple jobs always. That's just how life is. And so it was definitely a part of my life, but I didn't look at it as a career path. originally. When I got to law school, getting to law school, I had a lot of help from my pre-law advisor, a lot of help in terms of knowing what law schools are looking for, what they're not looking for, how you should go about this process. But then unfortunately, my first year at Harvard, Princeton no longer had a pre-law advisor, and so I unofficially started filling the gap, especially for a lot of Black and brown students. Really reflecting during my time at Harvard, while still actively pursuing child advocacy, I really reflected on the doors that opened to me when it came to higher education, when it came to the opportunities that I had because of the experiences and the people that had really helped me in this process. And so I started to look at it a little bit more as a profession. And that was an interesting time for me in law school because I'm simultaneously pursuing this child advocacy path while I'm meeting with admission deans and directors and learning about their career path and learning about what admissions looks like from both sides of the desk. I also was learning about being a businesswoman and being an entrepreneur and what that means. And I also was someone that was dealing with a lot of health issues, and so stability and healthcare and predictable income was important to me. And so I'm balancing all of these things at 24 and trying to figure out what that all means. I did know that it was important to me that I continue the work that I set out to do. So that's why I clerked, and I wanted to pursue it fully, but at the same time I enrolled in the University of California, Irvine's Independent Educational Consulting certificate program, their graduate program, because it's important to me that I am trained in anything that I do. So I was still sort of on these two paths. And I know this seems like a really long story. Like, Sydney, where are we going to get to the part where you stop practicing law? I think it's important to understand that I didn't just wake up one day and decide I'm not practicing law anymore, that it was a gradual thing, that the framework had really been laid in high school and in college. I just couldn't see it yet. And I'm so thankful for my law degree and the teachings that it gave me and the way that it has helped me in so many areas of my life. I wouldn't go back and trade it. I did that certificate program while I clerked. I was still consulting at this point, both 9th through 12th grade students and law school students. And even though I was feeling this pull towards admissions, I didn't feel like I could do it. I didn't feel like I could be a full-time entrepreneur at 25. I had bills, I had medical expenses, I help support my sister financially in some ways. I just felt like people who could do it on their own have parents who can pay for things, or they have a safety net, or I don't know, they're not me, right? It seemed like a pipe dream. One day I'll be able to consult full time, but right now the real world says I have to work. However, for me, what ended up happening is not soon after I started at the firm, my health really declined. And I am very open about the fact that I am someone who's living with autoimmune diseases, and I have connective tissue disease, and I really was in a not so great place with my health at that time. And so as I was navigating that year, I really did a lot of praying. I'm a woman of faith, and prayer is very important to me. And I did a lot of prayer and fasting for the first time with my church because I was trying to figure out what God was saying to me. I knew that God had been with me on this entire journey, right? He saw that I was able to get into these schools, Princeton, Harvard Law School. You're supposed to be this fantastic attorney. But it just wasn't seeming to work. I was commuting over an hour each way to work. I was exhausted. My body was not very happy with me. And I still had this passion and this drive to work with these students and to make an impact in the educational consulting profession. And I wasn't sure what God was saying to me. And it became very clear. He made it very clear that I needed to trust him. He made it very clear that I needed to stop fighting what he was calling me for. And even though I didn't fully understand it at the time, I realized that that is exactly what I needed to do. But the realization really didn't come overnight. I'm going to be very transparent with you. I really was afraid. And I also was worried about what people would think. What are they going to say? I wasn't even a lawyer for that long. She went to Harvard Law School and then she just quit. I was afraid of letting people down. I was afraid of letting my church down. I felt like everyone had believed in me and believed in my ability to be an attorney, and I was quitting. Um, I ended up taking a medical leave of absence in March, right around. Actually, I took a medical leave of absence, I think the week before basically the world shut down. And it was really a moment of reckoning about what am I going to do, right? I have this medical leave. I have this moment. My doctors made it very clear that I could not continue working full time at the firm, that it was non negotiable. And I was at a crossroads. And so I ended up deciding that I would take that leap and I would lean into what I now know to be my purpose. And so, even in the midst of the pandemic, even in the midst of medical uncertainty, I decided to leave the firm and I decided to lean into consulting. And every reason that I gave myself for why I wasn't able to do it, why I couldn't do it, I just had to turn it around. I started writing on sticky notes. You can do it. Your dream is attainable. You will not fail. You will not starve. I always say that I'm concerned if I didn't live at home, I'd just be out on the streets. But God really was remarkable. God was remarkable. Even in the midst of the pandemic, He ended up making a way for me to have a platform, not only so that I would not starve, but so that I could impact so many future lawyers, so many high school students striving. I worked with so many students that first year full time. It was unreal. I mean, when I say that my business like increased almost tenfold, I mean, it's really only God. And the more that I leaned into Him and the more that I leaned into my faith, and every time I've had a question in my business, I've said, God, where do you want me to go? And He tells me. And so for me, of course, not all of my students are Christian or they have faith. Some of them have different faith, and that's okay, right? I love all of my students, no matter their background or their culture. But in terms of how I serve them and how I show up for them, I want to be a person through which Christ is seen through my business, through the way that I conduct myself and the way that I serve others and I show up for others. And I have also found that the more content I'm able to give away for free, the more I'm able to really serve, the more blessings get poured back in to me. And so it's a very long answer, I guess, why you don't practice law anymore, because I felt that God was really calling me to help raise up the next generation of attorneys, to be the voice in my generation that stands up to systemic racism in education and really tries to dismantle the barriers to higher education for so many. I believe firmly in this mission and this passion. I believe firmly in the fact that we need culturally competent fighters, advocates, justice warriors, that even ninth and 10th graders need to have strong models of what passionately going after your dreams looks like, and that we need more women who feel fearless, or even if they feel fear, that they don't let it stop them, that we need more women of color to step into their own right and to be able to have the freedom to work excellently in their zone. And so I believe strongly in my mission and my passion, and I absolutely loved my time practicing law. I loved my firm. I'm still in close contact with some of them, and I'm so happy that I did it. I'm so happy. And maybe one day I might do probably mediation. I don't think litigation is for me, but maybe I won't. But I think that really I went through those doors. I went to Princeton and I went to Harvard Law School because God needed me to open doors for other people. And so I think He used those experiences as a way to enable me to be a vehicle for others. And for that, I'm so grateful and I'm so humbled by that. And so, no, I don't practice law anymore. It's not because the law isn't for me or it wasn't what I thought it would be or I couldn't hack it as an attorney or any of those things. It's because sometimes when you feel a magnetic pull to really be in your purpose, you have to listen to it. There is no shame in choosing to do something different than the original plan. There is nothing wrong with having a change of plans. I think sometimes we stay in things because we're afraid of what it might look like to others if we change our mind. But I think we need to be afraid of what it might look like to ourselves if we say no to ourselves and we're not honest with ourselves. So I know that I'm incredibly happy, more happy than I could have, happier than I could have imagined, and so humbled every day by the stories of the students whose lives I touch, by taking someone who thought they couldn't get into law school and helping them get a full ride and helping them get to the place where their life is going to be changed and they're going to impact their community and they're going to touch someone else's life. That's the greatest joy that I ever could have. You know, having a student, a first generation student, tell me that they got into an Ivy League university for undergrad or that they got that full ride to that HBCU they've been eyeing. Having a student tell me that, yes, they were able to get into a T14 or a top 10 school. Those are the stories. Even if it's just, hey, I got into the law school, that doesn't mean I have to move and my family can stay here and I'm going to be an attorney, no matter the ranking. That I'm going to have this life that I've been dreaming for myself. That is all that I ever could have asked for, hoped for, or dreamed. More than that, even. So I am so honored and so blessed and excited that I get to share this story with you because I know so many people ask, and it's not something that I'm ashamed of, but I think it's time to be more open about that. No, I don't practice law anymore. Yes, I still help people get to law school. Yes, I still love the law and I loved my time in law school. I really did. Even 1L, I loved my time in law school. And I know that you will too. And just because my journey didn't end in me still practicing law doesn't mean that the journey wasn't worth it. And your journey will be worth it too, whether or not you practice law, whether you practice for a little bit or you practice for a lifetime. The experiences that we go through are what make us stronger, and it's what makes us who we are.